Ed Orgeron of the LSU Tigers. Now, I was going to save this segment for next week, but why not start it now, seeing how this weekend is kind of the eve of the Alabama-LSU matchup, which is set up for next week, November 14th in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Tiger Stadium. This is the matchup that typically, Alabama fans are a bit nervous about, are a bit anxious about, are a bit kind of worrisome about, because usually the Alabama-LSU matchup, Tide fans have much respect. Typically, Alabama fans, you guys have much respect for LSU, whether it's how the game takes so much out of players mentally, physically, emotionally, whether it's how much the LSU game takes out of you being a fan, mentally, emotionally, physically, as well, as you guys yelling and screaming your heads off at the Tide in this matchup. So usually, this game is always the game circled the most on the calendar, because U.S. fans, it's, you always have to have that inner fear of, LSU. They're tough, they're physical, they're big time. This is a program that always gives us the most gritty, tough, challenging, emotional, that type of a football game. And we have grown to expect those types of matchups in the Alabama-LSU rivalry here. But this season, it just feels like not a lot of Alabama fans are checking for LSU. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like this year it's like not a lot of Tide fans are really, truly checking for LSU. Probably because this is not the same Tiger team that it was a season ago, and all of the pieces that were lost to the NFL draft, and the coaches that were lost to other programs, and the players that opted out due to whether it was COVID concerns or guys trying to prepare for the next level. But it just feels like, to me, not a lot of Bama fans are really truly checking for LSU or worried about the Tigers as they would be in recent seasons. And now, of course, Ed Orgeron was on the SEC coaches teleconference on Wednesday, and he was thrown the question, or the question was directed to him, how is he keeping the team engaged during this time this season? The Tigers right now 2-3 on the year. They have not looked like defending national champions, but the question was, how are you keeping this team engaged? And Ed O basically said, look, we got the University of Alabama coming in here next week. We got our biggest rival coming to us, coming to Tiger Stadium, coming to Death Valley, coming to Baton Rouge. Like, our biggest rival is coming here to play us. I mean, that's enough right there to make sure that we're engaged here for this matchup. So LSU probably will not have Miles Brennan for this game, as he's been dealing with abdomen issues. They've been working with two true freshman quarterbacks, TJ Finley and Max Johnson. But yet, according to Ed Orgeron, this is the Super Bowl for LSU. This is the Super Bowl for the Tigers in facing Alabama. This is the game right here that can kind of salvage its season, as Alabama 6-0, trying to go 7-0 and continue the push toward an SEC championship appearance, and trying to get into that college football playoff. LSU trying to play spoiler here and salvage its season. Now, while Ed O is referring to Alabama as LSU's biggest rival, for Crimson Tide fans, you guys don't even look at LSU as the biggest rival. The biggest rival is a coin flip at times for you guys between Tennessee and Auburn. Now, Auburn has won 2 of the last 3 Iron Bowls, and Noah Igbenogany, former Auburn corner, talked about this summer that, Auburn's the king of the state right now. Of course, Alabama has to pay Auburn that visit later on. Well, Auburn has to come to Tuscaloosa, but you get the point I'm trying to make here. Alabama has its revenge game against Auburn later on in the year, but typically for you guys as Bama fans, it's a coin flip between the Tigers of Auburn and the Volunteers of Tennessee in terms of the biggest rival. But according to Ed O here, Alabama, this game next week, is the biggest rival for the LSU Tigers. And another thing that Coach O brought up was there was a question thrown to him about, well, looking at how Mac Jones has performed this season, he's at the front of the Heisman race, and how Joe Burrow performed last season in 2019, the winner of the Heisman Trophy and the number 1 overall pick back in April of this year's draft. The question was, the comparisons between Mac Jones and Joe Burrow. And Ed O basically said, well, I haven't watched Mac Jones this year. He's a good guy. He's a good kid. He's well coached. He's got great character and all of that. We'll see how he takes it. We know how Joe Burrow took us. We know how Joe took it. We have to kind of see how Mac Jones takes it. I mean, he's a good kid and all, but it's going to be a long time before we see another Joe Burrow come around here. Let me just tell you that. Now, some people took that as this was Ed O saying that there's not going to be another Joe Burrow coming around LSU anytime soon. But a lot of people took it more so as Ed O took a shot at Mac Jones. A lot of people are taking it as Ed O took a huge shot there at Mac Jones. Now, through 6 games, the numbers of both quarterbacks are identical. Through 6 games. Joe Burrow 6 games last year, Mac Jones 6 games this year, despite the fact that Burrow had more, easier games, lower tier competition of the schedule. I mean, both guys at this point in time completing 78.5%. Mac Jones has more passing yards than Joe Burrow did. Mac with 2,196. Burrow with 2,157. I mean, Burrow has, more touchdowns, 25-16, but he played in a bit more easy games. Mac Jones has the better QBR at 95.5. But the numbers are basically identical here, and this is with Mac Jones having a tougher schedule. But Ed Orgeron going with the quarterback that he had last year and saying that, hey, it's going to be a long time before there's another Joe Burrow walking through the SEC. We'll just see here. But the one thing that Bama fans remember and Alabama players remember, there's not going to need to be a lot of added motivation for this game. I mean, LSU got the 46-41 win last season at Bryant-Denny Stadium, beating the Tua Tagovailoa that played on one ankle and still had over 400 passing yards, 418 with 4 touchdowns. Devontae Smith ate Derek Stingley's lunch, in that game, over 200 yards receiving there for Devontae Smith. But after the game, we all remember the video that was recorded and put on IG Live where Ed Orgeron said some things in the locker room about beating Alabama in recruiting and beating Alabama every time that LSU plays Alabama. And we all remember the famous Roll Tide, what bleep you? We all remember that statement there in the locker room. Of course, it's been played all week here on social media. And if I was Alabama, if I was, anybody within this program, I would have that video just playing on loop inside the locker room, not just this week, but also next week, just as a reminder, hey, Bama guys, hey, players, hey, team, this was what was said in our locker room last year. This was how they treated us in our locker room, our house last year, cussing us out, saying that, hey, they're going to beat us every time they see us. It kind of reminds me of, remember, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the Miami Hurricanes used to take on Florida State, and at practices, Miami used to have the Florida State theme song played every practice. It would be, that whole thing. And they used to hear that every day in practice. So by the time the game came, that noise would not affect Miami because they've heard it all week in practice. If I was the coaching staff, I would be playing that video in the locker room every day this week and every day next week, just getting these guys in that mental frame of, hey, we lost to these guys last year. They're already talking more junk. Let's get this thing prepared. Let's get this thing rocking and rolling. But Ed Orgeron calling Alabama the biggest rival for LSU for this matchup. Tide Nation, how do you feel about that? Thank you for watching Touchdown Alabama Magazine's YouTube channel. To continue to get the best in Alabama football content, subscribe here and turn on your notifications to stay connected with the hottest shows covering your Crimson Tide.